My name is Carmon Elise Bennett. I'm 26 years old. And this is the story of how I was thrown out pregnant, humiliated, and left with just $128 in my account, only to return years later as the CEO they never saw coming. It started with a message that seemed harmless: "Come home tonight. 6 p.m., we need to talk." No explanation. Just that. My first instinct was that it was about my sister Belle's upcoming wedding or maybe my brother Landon's new role at the real estate firm. Family talks usually meant some bragging session, some show and tell about someone's latest success. I'd learned to keep my expectations low. But the moment I stepped through that familiar front door, I knew something was different. There was no smell of Mom's garlic chicken or jazz humming softly from the kitchen speaker. No clatter of dishes. Just silence. Thick and sour. They were already seated, my parents, Belle, and Landon. No smiles. No one rose to greet me. I felt like I had walked into a courtroom with the verdict already written. "You're late," Dad muttered, eyes glued to the armrest. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Traffic," I replied, offering a small smile, trying to break the tension. But no one replied. Mom didn't look up. Belle avoided my gaze altogether, her arms folded like a shield. Only Landon met my eyes, with a smugness that hit me like a slap. He looked like he couldn't wait to speak. "Sit down," Dad ordered. I sat, the only empty seat in the room, by the window where the last sunlight filtered through. It cast long shadows across the rug and made everyone look distant, hollow. Then Landon struck. "She's been stealing money," he said. "From Mom and Dad's retirement fund." He slid a printed bank statement across the coffee table. Red circles highlighted transactions I didn't recognize. My name was printed beside one, but not my full name. Just C. Bennett. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. Before I could get a word in, Belle jumped in like she'd been rehearsing it. "You slept with my fiancé." He told me everything. My heart dropped. "What are you?" I tried, but the words caught in my throat. No one looked shocked. No one asked a single question. Not even Mom. "You're not the daughter we used to know," she whispered, eyes down. "You can't be serious." I stood up, but my knees were unsteady. "We've discussed it," Dad said coldly. "As a family. As a family. You're no longer part of the trust," he continued. "It's best if you leave tonight." The word tonight shattered something inside me. Landon leaned back, like a man finally unburdened. "You've got an hour. Your stuff's in the hallway." I didn't cry. I wanted to. But the betrayal burned so hot, it boiled the tears away. I walked toward the garage, steps echoing in the silence. That's when I saw Dad, standing by the trash bin. He was holding the photo album, the one with me and Grandma, my high school graduation, my first cat, birthdays. The only copy. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice dry. "You won't need this where you're going," he said, and dropped it into the bin like it was nothing. I got in my car and drove with shaking hands, not knowing where to go. I didn't call anyone. Who would I even call? Eventually, I pulled into a sketchy motel off 3rd Street. The sign flickered. The room stank of bleach and something worse. I sat on the bed, still in my coat, holding my stomach. That's when I remembered. I fished through my purse and pulled out the test I hadn't dared take earlier. The bathroom light flickered as I stared down at the stick. 2 lines. Pregnant. Not 1 heartbeat, but 2. Twins. Camden, my Camden. He didn't know. I hadn't had the chance to tell him. We weren't broken up, not really, just on pause. My family had always judged him. Said he didn't fit our pedigree. No wealth. No connections. Just brains, ambition, and an honest heart. That night, I curled on the motel bed, hand over my belly. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because my body was too numb to feel anything. I had nothing. No home. No support. Just $128 in my account, and 2 lives growing inside me. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I remembered everything. I remembered Landon's shady behavior. How just a week before this, I'd used Mom's laptop to submit a scholarship app and log into my own bank to pay a processing fee. Landon had reset the password manager on that laptop. He had access to everything. He knew. He set me up. And Belle? I'd barely spoken to her fiancé. We exchanged 5 minutes of small talk at a party. She didn't need truth, she needed a target. They didn't just throw me out. They buried me. Painted me as a liar, a thief, a whore. But I wasn't going to stay buried. I pulled out the old leather-bound journal I used to call my survival log. I flipped to the page that held my summer research project, enzyme-based lipid conversion. Landon had stolen it years ago and pitched it at his university like it was his. I never forgot. I flipped again, to Grandma's last note. The ring she gave me, hidden inside an old book spine. Belle had stolen even that and claimed it at the funeral. Every page was a record. Not just of what I'd lost, but what I would rebuild. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen, barely visible. I'm not coming back for revenge, I whispered. I'm coming back for everything. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The motel room was still dark, lit only by a weak line of orange bleeding through the curtains. My back ached from sleeping on a mattress that felt like it had been built with bricks, but I didn't move. Not yet. My hand rested on my belly. 2 lives. 2 innocent passengers I hadn't planned for, but now, they were my reason. I hadn't told Camden. I hadn't told anyone. I hadn't told them that I wasn't the girl they thought they buried. By 7 a.m., I was already walking downtown, wrapped in a cheap hoodie, holding a list I scribbled on the back of a diner napkin: prenatal clinics, women's shelters, startup grant offices, public libraries. I was going to build something from this, even if I had to use scrap wood and spit. At the Tempe Public Library, I found a small desk in the back corner, near the old law books. I didn't have a laptop anymore, Dad kept it, but the library's computers were free. I signed up for a session and opened a blank document. Project, Solnova Bio. Name origin, Sol. Lineage. Nova, new beginning. Target market, women in underserved medical communities, especially pregnant women overlooked by modern healthcare. It wasn't just a science project anymore. It was personal. It was survival. I still had my old college notes saved in my email. Thankfully, Landon never thought to erase those. He didn't know I had copied my research into Google Drive under a different name. He thought he had stolen my future when he presented my lipid enzyme project as his. But I remembered the code. The framework. The chemical shorthand only I knew. As I typed, I thought about the moment I knew they never loved me the way they said they did. Thanksgiving, 2018. The last time Grandma joined us. That day, I wore her old bracelet. Belle glared at me across the table and said, "She only gave it to you because she pitied you." No one said a word. No one told her to stop. Dad kept carving turkey. Mom poured wine. Landon smirked. They didn't protect me then, and they wouldn't protect me now. That night in the motel, I scribbled more plans into my journal. Paper pages couldn't be hacked. Couldn't be erased. I mapped out a pitch deck from scratch, focused on enzyme modulation to combat hormone imbalances during pregnancy. I wasn't inventing something just to get back at them, I was creating something because of them. Because there had to be women like me, disregarded, betrayed, cast out. I was building something that couldn't be taken away again. 2 days later, I took a bus to a women's clinic in a Mexican-American neighborhood in South Phoenix. The nurse who saw me didn't ask why I looked like I hadn't slept in a week. She just took my blood pressure, smiled at the sonogram, and whispered, "Twins. Both strong." That same day, I got a call I wasn't expecting. Camden. I had cancelled on him weeks ago, saying something had come up. He didn't ask questions then. He never pushed. But now, his name glowed on my phone screen like a memory I didn't deserve. I didn't answer. Instead, I got a message an hour later, "If it's true, you're not alone." I stared at the words for 5 minutes. Then I heard a knock. 2 soft taps. A pause. Then 2 again. Camden. Only he knocked like that. I opened the door. And there he was, same tousled hair, same steady eyes, same quiet strength. No judgment. No pity. "You okay?" he asked gently. I didn't answer. Just stepped aside. Let him in. We didn't say much. I didn't need to explain. I handed him the pregnancy test, and he looked at it for a long moment, then looked at me. "You don't have to explain," he said. But I did. They kicked me out. Said I stole? That I slept with Belle's fiancé. I didn't. I swear to God, Camden, I didn't. "I know," he said softly, placing his hand over mine. I never believed them. That night, Camden didn't leave. He booked a small apartment in South Tempe with his own savings and told his mother he wouldn't be coming home. Then he got a part-time job at a local data center. He didn't complain. He didn't ask for anything. He just made space, for me and for the 2 lives quietly growing in my body. I spent my days in the library. Nights sketching ideas on our living room wall. The enzyme project, once stolen, was now reborn, cleaner, stronger, mine. I added research about hormonal imbalances, prenatal deficiencies, long-term cycle tracking. And one day, I applied to a grant for women-led biotech startups. Camden watched me rehearse the pitch 22 times. He printed my slides at the library. Brewed the coffee I needed. Never once told me it was too much. When I was accepted into a 6-week startup accelerator for women in science, I cried in the parking lot and hugged him so tight I could barely breathe. Not out of joy, but because, for the first time in years, someone had said yes. At the pitch event, I stood on stage in a simple navy dress. My belly was showing now. One of the judges looked me up and down and asked, "Is this idea realistic for a single mother of twins?" I smiled through my exhaustion and replied, "It's realistic because I'm a single mother of twins." Camden stood at the back of the room. No applause. No grand standing ovation. But when I walked off that stage, he just whispered, "That was yours. And no one can take it this time." That night, I opened my phone, scrolled past the old contact names, Dad, Mom, Landon, Belle, and deleted every single one. They didn't just push me out. They gave me freedom. And I was only getting started. We moved again, this time into a modest 2-bedroom rental tucked behind a row of sun-bleached houses in South Tempe. The carpets were worn, the kitchen faucet dripped, and the heater wheezed like it had asthma, but it was ours. Camden insisted we paint the walls something bright. "New color for a new chapter," he said. I chose soft coral. The same color as the journal cover I used back in college. The one I filled with scribbled formulas and prayers whispered between anxiety attacks. Each morning, I woke up early, nausea still chasing me from the twins, and sat by the window drafting every inch of the Solnova bio pitch deck. Camden brewed coffee even though I couldn't stomach it anymore and packed his bag for the data center. We barely scraped by, his check covered rent and groceries, and mine went to prenatal vitamins and printing fees. But every day we got closer. Every day, I became more certain I didn't want revenge. I wanted visibility. I wanted women like me to be seen before they were erased. One afternoon, just after my 6th-month mark, I got the email. Subject: Initial funding approved. Body: Solnova bio is bold and deeply insightful. We believe in your voice. You're approved for $25,000. No strings. Just keep your voice steady. Rinsley, Southwest Biotech Innovation Fund. I read it 3 times, heart pounding so hard I thought I might be hurting the babies. I placed my hand over my belly and whispered, "They hurt us." Camden printed the email, taped it to the fridge, and stood back with a quiet pride in his eyes. "It's not just the money," he said. "It's the fact that someone saw you." The next few weeks were a blur of forms, contracts, and meetings. I set up Solanova's legal framework under a new name, Elena Mason. I needed a clean slate. Carmon Bennett carried too much pain, too much baggage. Elena was the name I used in old stories I wrote as a girl. Mason was Camden's last name, the only man who stood by me when everyone else turned away. And that's how I became Elena Mason, founder and CEO of Solnova Bio. I still hadn't told anyone from my old life. Not a text. Not a word. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want their confusion. I wanted them to keep believing I had vanished. It was better that way. Safer. But fate doesn't always respect silence. It was at a small biotech conference in downtown Phoenix, a panel discussion for women founders, that I saw her. Belle. Front and center on the sponsor banner, smiling under a shimmering slogan that read, "For a healthcare future led by women." The event was co-sponsored by the Belle Bennett Foundation. And beneath her face, in gold lettering, a quote. "We need solutions that start from within, where hormones and cells shape behavior." I froze. That line, that exact sentence, was the opening of my senior thesis. Word for word. No credit. No citation. Just Belle's face, beaming with fake sincerity, as if she'd conjured the concept over brunch. I stood in the conference hall bathroom, hands trembling as I read over the brochure again and again, checking for any possible mistake. But there it was, my work. My idea. Rebranded in Belle's name. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stared at the mirror and repeated, "They thought I disappeared." They had built a foundation, literally, on the ashes of what they burned. And now they were profiting off of my science, my experience, my pain. That night, I spoke at the panel. Not as a victim. Not as a warning. But as a quiet, blazing fire. Some of you may have read the phrase, "Medical solutions must start at the hormonal level." That wasn't a slogan. That was the first line of my thesis. Written in 2018 in a dorm room the size of a closet. Not created by a foundation. But by a 26-year-old woman pregnant with twins who refused to be silent. The room was silent. Then I added. And for the record. I don't have a sister. Gasps. Murmurs. Eyes darting to the banner behind me. I didn't need to name Belle. They knew. A clip of that line, "I don't have a sister," circulated online. Quietly, almost underground. But it grew. Female scientists reposted it. Journalists asked questions. Forums discussed the ethics of family-funded ventures and stolen research. I didn't engage. I didn't respond to the noise. But 3 days later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my door. Law offices of Mallister and Reed. Inside was a cease and desist letter from Belle's legal team. They wanted me to retract my comments. Apologize. Promise to stay silent. I smiled. And walked into my small office, the one with scuffed linoleum and a folding chair, and opened the drawer I'd prepared for months. Inside were time-stamped drafts of my original thesis. My research notebook from junior year. An external drive with audio recordings from a backyard party where Belle mocked my work. And a recording of my mother's voice saying, Carmon always makes things complicated. Belle makes everything smoother. That's why she had to go. I handed it all to my lawyer, Renee Whitmore. A sharp-tongued litigation powerhouse who once sued a pharmaceutical giant and walked out with a $17 million settlement. Renee reviewed the file, then called me. Her first words? "We don't need to threaten. We just need to show them we've been ready." And just like that, they weren't in control anymore. The trial was scheduled for early April. The air was dry and cool that morning, the kind of Arizona spring day that feels like it's waiting for something to erupt. I dressed in a charcoal blazer, yes, the same one my mother once said made me look too harsh, like a woman destined to stay single forever. I wanted to wear it now. Not to defy her. To remember. Camden drove me. He wore no tie, just a plain blue button-down and calm, focused eyes. He didn't speak much during the ride. He didn't need to. His presence was a steady current at my side, no performance, no posturing. Just a man who showed up, again and again. The courtroom was clean, clinical, sunlit through tall windows. The kind of place designed to make truth feel impersonal. But that morning, truth was burning under my skin. Belle arrived 10 minutes late, as always. Wearing oversized sunglasses and a carefully chosen cream dress that said victim and brand ambassador all at once. She walked in flanked by two attorneys dressed like they were billing by the second. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I watched her step inside and felt nothing. Not rage. Not grief. Just the cold satisfaction of someone who knew the fire had finally caught up. Judge Dorothy Leland presided, late 50s, razor-sharp eyes, and a reputation for not suffering fools. My lawyer, Renee, began with quiet power. She submitted every time-stamped file. My old thesis with metadata. My email logs. The audio recording where Belle joked to her friends, I just took her code, added emotion, and boom. Inspiring speech. And another one, my mother's voice, dismissive and cold. She doesn't know when to shut up. If she got pushed out, it's because she couldn't be controlled. When the recordings played, the room dropped into something deeper than silence. No one needed to guess if it was Belle's voice. No one needed subtitles. The smugness, the entitlement, it bled through every syllable. Belle's lawyers tried to argue miscommunication and family confusion. They said there was no clear copyright filing for my work at the time of its use. But Renee, calm as a loaded gun, simply slid the federal timestamp documents forward. My thesis had been submitted, reviewed, and digitally verified through my university system in 2018. Belle's foundation launched in 2021. 3 years later. And then came the final blow. The judge turned to Belle's team and said, "Do you contest that Ms. Bennett made the statements heard in the recording?" Her lawyer hesitated. "No, Your Honor." That was it. That one sentence broke the last thread holding Belle's illusion together. Judge Leland leaned forward and read aloud her ruling. This court hereby issues an immediate injunction. Ms. Belle Bennett and her associated entities may not use, reference, or benefit from any material, branding, quotations, or research content found to be derived from Ms. Carmon Bennett's original work until final judgment. This includes all materials connected to the Belle Bennett Foundation. No press cameras. No applause. Just the scratch of the judge's pen and Belle's carefully curated world collapsing quietly around her. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I walked out of that courtroom into the sunlight and exhaled, really exhaled, for the first time in years. Outside, Camden waited on the courthouse steps. I didn't have to say anything. He just opened the car door, like always. Like silence itself was a kind of answer. 3 weeks later, Solnova Bio was officially registered as a biotech entity. All forms were filed under my new legal name, Elena Mason. I didn't celebrate with champagne. I didn't post on social media. I just sat at my desk and stared at the confirmation email. Status, active. Founder, Elena Mason. It felt like seeing my name in print for the very first time. A name they couldn't tarnish. A name they couldn't steal. I poured every waking hour into developing hormone regulation kits for underserved prenatal clinics. I focused on women like my mother, who was diagnosed too late with ovarian cancer. I remembered how she sat on the exam table, belly bloated, doctor dismissing it as early menopause until it was too late. The guilt crept in sometimes. She had betrayed me, yes. But she was also the woman who once brushed my hair before kindergarten and saved my poetry under her pillow. She was complicated. But my work wasn't for her forgiveness. It was for every woman who didn't get the scan in time. Every girl who got dismissed. Every mother whose cries were filed away under anxiety. Camden helped me find an office in a modest co-working space near downtown. Gray walls. Rusted radiator. But there was a window, big and wide, and it let in enough sun to feel like hope. Our babies were due in a few months. Camden was already repainting the nursery and practicing swaddles using a rolled towel. Then, one evening, a yellow envelope arrived. No return address. Inside was a sticky note in thick block letters. Trash like you doesn't deserve to be a mother. Underneath it, a photo of my white car, taken at night. I showed it to Camden. He didn't panic. He didn't rage. He just said, "I'll install cameras. And from now on, I pick you up every day." The next morning, I found my car spray painted in red. Fake mother. I didn't clean it. I drove it to work with the message still loud on the hood, parked it out front, stepped out in a plain cotton dress that hugged my belly, and walked in with my laptop in hand. Everyone saw. And I let them. That same day, I signed my first clinic contract for Solnova Bio. We were going live. A week after the car was defaced, I got an email. No subject line. No greeting. Just one sentence. Belle's gone. It's just your mother and me now. Dad. I stared at it for what felt like an hour. No apology. No remorse. No check-in to ask if I was alive, let alone pregnant. Just a sentence, as dry and clipped as if he were informing me the garbage had been taken out. I didn't reply. I didn't even forward it to my lawyer. I deleted it, closed my laptop, and went back to editing a slide on Solanova's hormone response metrics for late-stage ovarian patients. Ironically, my mother had become the reason this kid existed. I remembered all too well. She had bled for weeks. Doctors said it was perimenopause. When I begged her to get a second opinion, she snapped, "Don't tell me what to do with my body. You don't even know what you're doing with your life." 3 months later, the scan showed advanced cancer. Too late for a clean removal. Too late for much of anything. She sat in that cold waiting room, her lips pale, her wrists thin, whispering to me, do you think people like me could have found out sooner?" I didn't have the words then. Now, I have Solnova. It's not for revenge. It's to give women like her a fighting chance. And maybe, just maybe, to rewrite the story I never got to finish with her. I never told her I was pregnant. I never got the chance. But I know now that motherhood isn't defined by how someone brings you into the world. It's how you choose to show up once you're in it. Weeks passed. We grew. Solnova signed 3 more pilot programs with community clinics across Arizona. Our testing kits were inexpensive, fast, and adaptable to both prenatal and general hormonal screenings. We were small, but no longer invisible. And I was no longer hiding. Each morning, I walked into our sunlit office, stepped past the glass door with my name, Elena Mason, founder, and stared at the whiteboard with the first sentence I wrote on it in black marker. They tried to write me out of the story. Now I'm rewriting it, with science. I wasn't interested in being a star. I didn't want to be famous. I just wanted to exist fully, on my own terms. Then, one sunny morning in late June, we got a message. A major public health conference was being held downtown. Small, intimate. Focused on women-led biotech firms innovating in the prenatal and hormonal space. They wanted me to speak on a discussion panel. At first, I almost declined. It fell on the same day as my final ultrasound appointment. But Camden convinced me. You can do both, he said. This isn't just a talk. It's a chance to stand where they said you'd never belong. So I accepted. I wore a charcoal maxi dress and flats. My belly was round and obvious now, no more hiding. No more folding my arms over it like it was a secret. It wasn't a weakness. It was proof. Camden drove me and waited outside. When I stepped into the conference lobby, my breath caught. Another banner. A new one. This time, not just Belle. But Dad and Mom. Standing behind a mock lab desk. Smiling like saints. The banner read. Family First Science, Bridging Generations Through Innovation. An initiative of the Bennett Research Group. There was no mention of me. Not my name. Not my work. Not even the legal injunction. I didn't speak to anyone. I sat in the front row, watched each speaker, waited for the moderator to call my name. Then I walked on stage. My palms were sweating. My ribs ached from where Leora had kicked me earlier that morning. But my voice was clear. Some of you may know the name Bennett in biotech spaces. I do too. I used to wear it. But today, I'm not standing here to reclaim that name. I'm standing here to bury it. I'm not a legacy. I'm not curated. I'm a woman who was thrown out with $128 in her account and 2 lives in her belly, and this science is mine. Silence. Then murmurs. I continued. I don't need apologies. I don't need them to say my name. I've already written a new one. My work isn't revenge. It's repair. And the only legacy I care about now is the one my children will inherit. And then, without pause, I said what needed to be said. And for the record, I have no family in this industry. No gasps this time. Just realization. And respect. Afterward, as I stepped outside, journalists asked for interviews. Young scientists offered to collaborate. One even said she'd named her thesis after my quote. Camden pulled up the car. I got in, exhaled, and finally let myself feel it. I wasn't invisible anymore. 3 days later, a letter arrived. This time, it wasn't Belle or my father. It was from the research board at Arizona State University. They'd seen the panel. Reviewed my case. A professor had anonymously submitted the original research I'd created years ago. They invited me to speak at a lecture series. Me. Not Belle. Not Landon. Me. I replied with one sentence. I'd be honored. At the end of that same week, I found a package on my doorstep. No return label. Inside, an old photograph. Yellowed at the edges. A child, me, standing beside my grandmother in a backyard garden, wearing the blue dress she made for me. I was smiling awkwardly, the kind of smile kids make before they learn how to fake confidence. On the back, written in faded purple ink. This is the version that matters. I don't know who sent it. Maybe a cousin who never said a word. Maybe someone who had quietly taken my side. Maybe the universe itself. I didn't cry. I just framed it. For once in my life, I was in a family photo, and no one had cut me out. I placed the photo on my office desk, right next to the atomic model I used to teach young interns about enzyme pathways. Every time I looked at it, I felt the tension in my chest ease a little more. Not because the past no longer hurt, but but because it finally had a place. And it wasn't behind me. It was beneath me. Foundation. Not weight. Leo and Leora were born 2 weeks early, in the middle of a monsoon night in late July. Camden didn't panic. Not when the contractions started. Not when the midwife's car got stuck in the flash flood. Not when the power blinked off for exactly 9 minutes during delivery. He lit candles, called emergency support, and held my hand without a tremor in his voice. And when the twins cried, both at the exact same moment, I felt a crack inside me begin to seal. We didn't post photos. No name announcements. No family group texts. The only people who held them in those first few days were me, Camden, the midwife, and a volunteer nurse named Alma, who brought warm towels and stayed 2 hours longer than she was paid for. In a way, the silence around their birth felt holy. 3 days later, a letter arrived. From my father. Handwritten. Your mother's in the hospital. It's serious. We've lost so much, Carmon. We want to make things right. There was no return address. No phone number. Just that. I read it while feeding Leora in the living room, her tiny fingers curled around mine like she already knew how to hold on. I didn't respond. They didn't just abandon me. They rewrote me. They turned me into a villain in a story they authored, and now they wanted to co-author the ending. But I had already published a new story. And in this version, they weren't in the acknowledgements. Fall came. Slowly, gently. Solnova Bio expanded into 6 community clinics across the Southwest. Then 10. We started receiving interest from nonprofit hospitals, women's health coalitions, even a few pharmaceutical startups curious to partner. I was cautious. Strategic. I remembered how easily power could be stolen, even by blood. One late October evening, as the air thinned and leaves curled yellow on the sidewalk, Camden and I hosted a small dinner for our team, 6 women, 3 men, all from different disciplines, all under 35. We ate lentil stew and homemade flatbread. Leo toddled around in a dinosaur onesie, Leora on Camden's lap nibbling on fruit slices. I sat back in my chair, hand on my heart, and realized I had created a table where I belonged. Not because I begged for a seat. Because I built it. That night, after the twins fell asleep, Camden brought out a small box. Inside, a silver necklace with a pendant shaped like a double helix. On the back, engraved in tiny cursive, "You didn't wait to be remembered. You chose to be real." I wore it every day after that. But life doesn't slow down, even when you're healing. A month later, I received a call from Renee. "Have you seen the papers?" "No, why?" "There's a lawsuit. Belle's being sued for embezzlement. From the very foundation she started." I stared at the kitchen wall, still covered in our weekly meal chart and crayon drawings from the twins. By who? 2 former board members. She skimmed from grant funds. Fabricated reports. Faked clinical data. The media is all over it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt nothing. She was a product of a system that rewarded image over honesty. A system that once chose her over me, without asking a single question. And now that same system was devouring her. Later that night, I saw her on a news clip. Tired. Hollow-eyed. Lipstick too red. Talking about misunderstandings and defamation by jealous competitors. I turned it off. I didn't need to see her fall. I had already risen. The next day, a small envelope arrived in our mailbox. Inside was a photo of my mother in a hospital bed. No message. No sender. Just her face, tired, older, staring directly into the lens like she knew it would reach me. For a brief second, I remembered the feel of her fingers braiding my hair. How she once pressed a cool washcloth to my fevered forehead. How she used to leave little notes in my lunchbox that said, "You're braver than you think." Before the silence. Before the betrayal. I placed the photo in a drawer. Not to forget. But because it didn't belong on the wall. Months passed. Solnova began international trials with 2 research institutes in Spain and Kenya. We developed a prenatal app that translated hormonal data into simple, visual graphs for low literacy patients. I spoke at 3 conferences. I hired a legal team to help underserved female scientists patent their work without predatory investors. One morning, a young intern named Zada stood at my door and asked if I had time for a question. Of course, I said. How do you know when you've healed? I smiled. You don't. Not all the way. But eventually, the memory doesn't steer the ship. It just rides in the back. She nodded, scribbled something in her notebook, and left. That night, I added it to my journal. The one I still kept. Healing isn't erasure. It's remembrance without surrender. Spring comes late in Arizona, but when it does, it creeps in quietly. No grand entrance. Just warmth. Subtle, steady warmth. The kind that seeps through open windows and into your bones. Our home in Chandler sat behind a row of pale stucco houses, tucked under a tangle of orange trees that Camden planted the month Leo and Leora learned to crawl. They were 3 years old now. Leora, loud, fearless, always running barefoot across the backyard. Leo, quiet and observant, always watching her with a grin like she was the punchline to a joke only he understood. Their laughter filled every corner of our lives. Every shadow of what once was. I stood by the kitchen sink, the same chipped porcelain one we'd never replaced, watching the twins chase butterflies between the garden beds. Camden was out back adjusting the swing he'd built himself. A red plastic shovel lay in the dirt near the apple tree, Leora's tiny handprints smeared across the fence. It was nothing fancy. But it was ours. Inside, on the kitchen table, sat a cardboard box with no return address. I didn't open it right away. Something about it felt different. I made tea first. Picked up a stray sock. Checked the twins' baby monitor even though they weren't napping. Then I sat down, hands steady, and peeled the tape back. Inside, wrapped in crinkled wax paper, was a photograph. Old. Yellowed at the edges. But unmistakable. Me, 11 years old, standing beside my grandmother in her garden. I wore the blue dress she made me. She had one arm around my shoulder, the other holding a bouquet of marigolds. My smile was awkward, teeth too big for my mouth, one braid lopsided. But it was real. I was real. I knew this photo. Or at least, I thought I did. Because back at the old house, the one I was kicked out of, this picture hung in the hallway. Except in that version, my part was cut out. Cropped. Only Grandma's shoulder and the flowers remained. I had been erased, literally. But this version? This was the whole picture. On the back, written in purple ink, was a single sentence. This is the version that matters. I didn't know who sent it. Maybe an old relative. Maybe a quiet apology from someone who had watched but never spoken. Maybe even my mother. Or maybe it was something else. A last echo of love from a woman who once held me close in a world that never did. I placed the photo on my desk beside my Solnova bioplaque. And I smiled, not the smile I gave strangers or journalists. But the one I had at 11. Before the pretending. A week later, Solnova began its largest pilot yet, a partnership with state clinics across 3 counties. We were developing a diagnostic tool to detect hormone-linked ovarian cancer risks in women under 35. It had taken 4 years, a mountain of paperwork, and enough sleepless nights to last a decade. But we did it. Not because someone opened a door. But because I built the damn door myself. That same day, a package arrived from the courthouse. Inside, a final judgment in the case of Savannah Carmon Bennett versus Belle Bennett. I hadn't gone back for the ruling. I didn't need the spectacle. But reading it felt like closing a wound I hadn't realized was still open. The judge's words were blunt and beautiful. Plaintiff's intellectual property was knowingly and repeatedly appropriated by the defendant for personal gain, branding, and public misrepresentation. The court awards full ownership of said materials and orders all affiliated content to be retracted from public channels. Bell's brand was gone. The foundation's website was deactivated. All promotional materials pulled. Just like that, quietly, almost politely, the lie collapsed. No headlines. No exposé. Just justice. Later that evening, I stood beneath our backyard pergola while Camden set up the outdoor lights. The twins were inside with finger paint and a playlist of lullabies. The scent of orange blossoms carried on the breeze, mingling with the laughter coming from the house. I held a glass of lemonade and stared at the photo again. For the first time in years, I was in a family photo where I hadn't been cropped out. That's what Soul Nova had become. A frame they couldn't edit. A truth they couldn't twist. I thought about the night they threw me out, pregnant, confused, betrayed. About how they packed my things like I was trash. How Landon grinned like a man closing a deal. How Belle turned her face away and said, "You slept with my fiancé," as if saying it made it true. They had cut me off like a bad limb. But what they didn't realize was, I was the root. Everything they tried to bury grew back stronger. Wiser. Kinder. I no longer dream about them. I no longer crave apologies or letters or calls. I have Camden. I have Leo and Leora. I have a team of women scientists who once thought they didn't belong, and now lead clinical research that changes lives. I have my name. Elena Mason. And no one can erase that. Carmon's story, Elena's story, isn't just about revenge. It's about becoming undeniable in a world that tried to make her invisible. About using betrayal as blueprint. About building something with the same hands that were once left empty. They tried to erase her. She chose to rewrite everything. What would you do if your own family cast you out? Would you disappear, or would you come back stronger, louder, and impossible to ignore? If this story spoke to something deep inside you, don't forget to subscribe to Revenge Echoes, where real stories cut deeper than fiction. Leave a comment below and share this video with someone who needs to be reminded, the best kind of justice is living well.